we're going to talk about Game of Thrones. So if you haven't watched the latest episode, okay, spoiler alert, okay? Now I got in a little bit of trouble on Twitter because I forgot there's a West Coast feed and that some people are on. If you haven't watched Game of Thrones episode yet, don't go on Twitter. I love your brother. I mean, but I assume that everybody reacted the same way I did. And I sent out a tweet, but I feel terrible about it because I shouldn't assume everybody does the same thing I do, right? You know how we have the No Apologies tour, which by the way is sold out, not a big deal. Okay, but I apologize profusely for this. It was like I was working at MSNBC. I'm like, for any of you who hadn't seen the episode yet, I'm so sorry. So now we gave you the spoiler alert here, so I'm going to tell you, okay? So Joffrey was killed. He was the worst villain in television history. And I loved it. For our full review that Anna and I did, we do it immediately after the show. So come to youtube.com/TYT. It's a live review. Yeah. And I was like, oh, I give standing ovation.
No, what you guys fail to understand right now, you're not sitting next to him, but as he's talking about that episode, as he's talking about his review of that episode, he's getting excited. He does this. Have you guys noticed?
No, you know why? I'm lifting up the desk, you know, like, because I'm so excited.
Oh, my God. All right, but
that knocking sound you heard. Anyway.
But there are some drams behind our support and enthusiasm of Joffrey's death, right?
Yeah, so that's why we bring you this story. So, and I knew it was going to happen, and it happened. So I go on Twitter and I say like, down goes Joffrey, down goes Joffrey. And a liberal friend, okay, I actually know the guy, but I don't want to out him here. And there might have been more tweets about this, but I just read his. Said, you know, Cenk, should you really be celebrating the death of anyone?
Was he being serious, or maybe?
I think no, I know the guy. I think he was being serious. I'm almost positive he was being serious.
Has he watched Game of Thrones?
That I don't know.
See, because I think that's relevant. Because for someone who doesn't watch Game of Thrones, for someone to be so ecstatic about someone's death, it seems a little odd, right? Especially coming from another liberal. But if you watch Game of Thrones, you know how deplorable Joffrey is, and you literally cannot wait for the moment that he dies. The only thing that you hope for is the most torturous death possible, right? And so, yeah, so that's my take on it. But of course, there's a whole question of fact or fiction, and it's a fictional show based on a book or a series of books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, if he was a real person, I'd want him dead even more. So I know I shouldn't say that, but you know what? Let's drop it and see what liberal TYT Supreme Court's going to decide on this. Joffrey was a despised character. If you don't watch Game of Thrones, I mean, he would mutilate people for his own amusement. He would embarrass and humiliate everyone. He had unearned confidence to no end. He made George W. Bush look humble. Okay, I mean, it was hideous on top of hideous, and he caused so many deaths that were totally unnecessary. So,
and then he would mock the family members of the victims that he killed.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
horrible guy.
Now, first of all, it's fiction, so of course he should be killed. It's fiction. But if it wasn't fiction, and you have a guy like that, would we be I don't know? Would you be sad because he was a human being and he died? And maybe I'm not liberal enough, but no, I wouldn't be remorseful.
Mm-hmm. No. I know, I'm a bad person, but whatever. I mean...
Yeah, that's the thing. Are we bad people? Or are we, or is
we live in a society where people don't care when good people die. You know what I mean? Like you hear stories about random people being victims of drone strikes abroad, and nobody even flinches. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is a show. It's a show with a really, really bad guy. If he dies, no, I don't feel bad about it at all. We had horrible dictators and people who went around killing others, and then we found them and we hanged them and we did what we did with them, and no one was upset about that. No one said no, we shouldn't be celebrating, this death. No, it happens.
Now, Jayar doesn't watch Game of Thrones, so it's...
Well, it's a matter of not... That's based on plotline, which I don't understand even. But, I mean, like you said, you give the general rundown. The only reason it should be a problem if you are celebrating a death of a fictional person, because we all know who cares, it's fiction, is if it then would lead to some real life violence. And I don't think that makes any sense. Again, I don't know the show. I know people are so into it that they're like, hey, Cenk Uygur celebrated this guy's death. I'm gonna go kill somebody. I mean,
All right. I mean, how about the Balrog? Could we root against him in Lord of the Rings? Can we root against the Klingons in the old days? Now we can't. They're part of the Federation, but yes.
I have to jump in with one other thing. I think, I don't know what it is with people obsessing over death and respecting people who have died regardless of what they were like when they were alive, right?
Right.
So even today, like let's say a really, really bad person dies. Someone who did terrible things to many people, like Kim Jong-un, right? Or let's say, if he died, what, we're supposed to pretend like, hey, you know what, he's a respectable guy, we should respect his death? No, he's a terrible person.
So that's where I'm going with this. I think that that we care too much about death. Like that's some sort of turning point where we're supposed to all turn around and then be like, oh no, okay, now we change our opinion on the guy and we should say good things about him. Like you shouldn't speak ill of the dead. No, I think if you were a prick when you were alive and you're a prick when you're dead. So I would celebrate Kim Jong-un's death. He still runs concentration camps. I mean, we got a story later in the show about what a horrible human being he is and the entire military leadership of North Korea. I would have no problem with them dying. I'd push a button to make it happen. I wouldn't go to war, etc. That's a whole different complicated issue, right? And you might have unintended consequences, etc. But no, Kim Jong-un is so clear, as Joffrey's clear. I mean, it couldn't be. It's not a gray issue. It's not a black and white issue. Now, if you're talking about political opponents, you shouldn't celebrate their death, right? Now, on the other hand, when Dick Cheney passes, it isn't going to magically make him a better person, right? You shouldn't celebrate it. That's okay. That's a little ugly. I get that, right? But at the same time, they shouldn't be fawning over him like, oh, the beloved Dick Cheney who did all these wonderful things. No, he did crappy things. That's what he did, and him passing isn't going to change that.
Here's the thing. If you think it's totally fine to celebrate Joffrey's death because he's a bad guy, then there are certainly people who are going to think it's okay to celebrate Dick Cheney's death because they're going to say, well, Dick Cheney caused my family to die, Iraqis or even Americans who died in the war. And then there'll be people who are going to say, well, it's okay to celebrate Obama's death because Obama did this and it led to this and led to that, blah, blah, blah. So the people who are saying that you should celebrate anyone's death, they're coming from the perspective of all life is good, all life is equal, and we're not here to make those value judgments on whose life is more valuable. Now, I don't believe that either, but that's where they're coming from. And their argument, even though I disagree with it, makes some sense, logical sense, because okay, Dick Cheney, let's go to Joffrey. Joffrey's an easy example, okay? But in this room, if we're all dying of some sort of disease, there's one antidote, like who gets it? Should we have a drawing? Or should we try to make a value judgment on whose life is most worth saving?
Now you're getting into a much more difficult question.
Of course. Look. But I think that's where they're coming from. They're saying that all life is equal, which I disagree with.
Right, but that's why that's why maybe we're not quite as liberal as we think we are, or that others think that we are. And that's why, as Ana said, maybe they're better people than us that say that, hey, you shouldn't make value judgments on anybody. Me, I make value judgments, and I do it all the time. So, look, when it's a gray area like Dick Cheney, right, you might not think it's gray at all. I would leave the celebration out of it, right? And that includes 99.98% of the population, right? At least, probably a far bigger percentage than that, right? But when you have a Kim Jong-un or a Joffrey, even if you're a liberal, dude, it's okay to say, hey, you know what? That guy who killed all those people, enslaved all those people, it's all right to say, hey, thank God he's not around anymore.
But here's another element to this that I think we should consider. Like, let's say someone does celebrate Dick Cheney's death. Who gives a shit, right?
Yeah, that's up to them.
So maybe Dick Cheney is a terrible person to someone, but a great person to someone else. Let them decide how they're gonna feel about that death. I don't care how someone feels about that death. I know how I would feel about it. Am I gonna take to the streets and hold signs saying, yeah, ding dong, the witch is dead? Like, am I gonna say stuff like that? No, if someone else does it though, I don't really give a shit. It doesn't impact my life. I don't wanna sit here and judge the way other people perceive world leaders or dictators or characters in movies and TV shows. It's none of my business, right? Everyone has their own perception. They can express it any way that they want. And instead of sitting around and judging other people for how they feel about someone's death, why don't we just all relax?
Yeah, and look, if your family member was killed in a wedding in northern Pakistan and they were perfectly innocent, and the person who made that ultimate decision was President Obama, and when he passes, you celebrate, that's your business. I might not agree, etc., but it is what it is, and so you're going to react in any way that you damn well please, as Ana said. I just think that there's bounds of reason on, no, we should respect all life forms, even the hideous ones that are murdering everyone else, and so we should make sure that we're remorseful even when Joffrey dies. Final word goes to Chief Justice. Glad that Joffrey's dead?
I mean, it's just sad it happened so soon in the season, that's all.
And as Ana said, it's a shame it didn't last long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is what it is.